True. We're going to be talking about EXP-100 today with the developers of the learning path. That's one of those items I think that we should talk to is why is it not a course? Why is it a learning path? What's going on there? What does this mean? So let's start out before we dive into some of the questions, like who do we have with us here? You know, who are you? What's your name? What do you do? Why are you on the stream? So let's go ahead and start with you, Will, since you're the new guy we can mess with, right? So yeah.
Always mess with a new guy. It's a good rule.
Yeah.
Hi everyone, my name is Will. I'm an associate content developer here at OffSec. I'm working primarily on the EXP-100 content.
Awesome. And Csaba, tell me about yourself.
My name is Csaba. I am also working for OffSec as a content developer, and I'm mainly responsible for the macOS course, EXP-100, but I also wrote quite a few modules for EXP-100.
Awesome. And Jeremy, you're never on these types of things. No one knows who you are. What's going on? Introduce yourself.
Yeah, no one knows who I am because I don't actually do anything. That's the secret. I don't work on EXP-100 and I don't work on EXP-312. I just spend my time in meetings, and that's really what I do.
That is the way of the world, huh? Yep. Okay, so we are going to talk about EXP-100. Let's start out with what is EXP-100? What if someone starts going through EXP-100, what do you want them to get out of it? What was the design goals there? Who wants to start?
Okay, I will start with this. So I think to me is, so the EXP track is, as the name suggests, is for the exploit development learning path. And I think the goal with EXP-100 is lay down the fundamentals for people who wants to step on the path of developing exploits, like really the basics. We don't really touch exploitation yet at this level or at this stage, but we've really focused on the foundations, skills and knowledge people will require for exploitation, and I think in fact reverse engineering. So for example, like know how to use various tools like debuggers, know the basics of assembly. Again, we will not write shell codes at this stage or reverse like complex applications or anything, just to know like what are the assembly instructions, how you use them, how you make some very really basic code snippets with that, and so on. So I think the key is the foundation knowledge for to jump from for more advanced stuff.
Awesome. Anything to add at all, Will?
No, I would agree with what Csaba said. I think, you know, not only are we hitting the fundamentals, but we're sort of hitting them in a kind of progressive fashion with very little assumed knowledge. And I think sort of at the end of that process, someone should be able to jump into dealing with the exploits themselves and being able to focus on them instead of learning, 10 things at once.
Gotcha. So it's 100 level. Can you guys maybe dive a little bit deeper into what separates EXP-100, EXP-200? Like what knowledge do you have to have in order to start with 100? And when you go through 100, you finish, are you ready immediately to do 200? How does that work?
Yeah, I think one thing that might be confusing for students is that right now we don't really have a course called EXP-200. We have content in the 301 course, in EXP 301, that is relatively easy, that can be at the 200 level, but currently isn't described that way. So for example, the initial buffer overflow, vanilla buffer overflow, SEH overwrites, those are easy compared to the rest of what's in the EXP 301 course. However, they are significantly harder than the entry points to other 200 level courses like PWK or SOC 200 or Web 200. And so we struggle a little bit to make sure that a student knows what they're getting into. But the idea, and Will, Csaba, please tell us exactly how this works, is once you do EXP 100, you can jump to EXP 301.
Yeah, I think that's correct. I mean, just to go back to the beginning where Jim started, I think the level of assumed knowledge is very low, maybe, nothing. We start with Linux and Windows fundamentals, move through bash scripting, Python, then introduce some assembly languages, then debuggers, disassemblers, etc. And those are sort of like the core tools and concepts from which something like EXP 301 begins.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So I think another confusing thing for some people is we're talking about EXP-100. Is EXP-100 a course? How does that work?
Yeah, so the way that we're defining courses is a course is a learning path, and a learning path is a bunch of modules under a coherent theme or subject, but a course ends with an exam. So PWK is a course because it ends with the OSCP. Same with EXP 312, that ends with OSMR. Because the, let's call them 100 level items, end with badges, we don't consider them courses, just to differentiate the two. Right now, EXP 100 doesn't have a badge. 10-100 does, SOC 100 does, Web 100 does, and later we might add some extra badges to EXP 100, Cloud 100, Secure Software 100. So that's really the difference. It's more semantic than super meaningful in terms of what it means for the student. You still are going to go through course content, you're going to go through labs, you're going to go through exercises. At the end, if all goes well, you'll go through some kind of assessment test exam thing.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Makes sense. Okay, that is helpful, I think, for a lot of people. That differentiation can be confusing if you're not embedded in the day-to-day like we are. So I find so I used to teach Pen 200 in the live classroom, and I know from my experience, class after class, the topic that everyone would love was the introduction to exploitation that was covered within there. That initial vanilla buffer overflow was empowering, right? It was there's something about that aspect of you got a whole team of people that have wrote this software package, and they've composed it, and they together. It's been QA'd, it's been reviewed, it's been documented. Teams of people have worked on this, and then you are now empowered to the point where you can say, all this work that you've done, I'm throwing it out the window. I'm going to reach in there. I'm going to change the intent of the program, what it was made to do. It's going to now do what I want it to do, not what it was designed to do. And I have that power over not just my system, but your system as well. And I'm going to make your system do whatever it is I want it to do with my exploit and my payload that I put together. So that super empowering for people, and very much something that everybody really loved. Having the ability to get into that at on a more open level, more accessible to more people is something that is very empowering, very, very awesome. But at the same time, when I look at what I experience in the classroom, certainly difficult for people that are starting out to get in there. From the content development perspective, how did you deal with that challenge of getting people, as you say, starting with close to no experience with this, getting them active where they can do something and it's productive? How big hill to climb. How do you do it in a way that's manageable to that with that level of experience?
I think it's tough. It's not easy, certainly. I think we do expect people to have not necessarily formal computer science or engineering background, but at least the mindset or familiar with computers more than an average user, I would say. I think what's really hard in even a vanilla buffer overflow, when you get there, you probably meet first time with assembly at all, the stack, how that works, how really all the programs work on a low level basis, on bytecode level, how it comes together. I think people generally don't know that, and I think there is a lot to consume in really one go, even for just like a simple vanilla buffer overflow. Know the registers, how everything comes together, and once you know that, then how you can control the program flow with various tricks, etc. I think even a buffer overflow is a steep learning curve from ground zero compared to stuff like SQL injection. I think that's more easier to consume than this, especially you play around all the hex numbers and you can play with the bits really. So I think with EXP-100 we try to take part of this knowledge or part of the stuff you need to learn for exploitation, for example, to know assembly or to know what's the stack, what are the registers. So take this out and learn them on their own, basically. So once you know that, you have an easier step when you go to buffer or exploitation.
Yeah.
Or in fact, reverse engineering in general, or basically any field that where you are expected to deal with the low-level program code. So I think, yeah.
Yeah. Anything to add to that, guys?
I would just expand on what Csaba said. I think, one thing he pointed out earlier is that EXP-100 doesn't really contain actual exploits. So you've sort of like abstracted that piece out, broken down all of the different elements that are included, made them into individual modules. So assembly for one module, debugging for another, disassembly, etc. And then hit each of those sequentially and, in my opinion, at a little bit of a deeper level than you would find when you're first encountering a buffer overflow. And I think, hopefully, when all that is said and done, you'll be in a really good position to step into the actual exploits. Awesome.
Yeah, what I like about what I'm hearing from you guys on this is the fact that the knowledge that you're picking up is not just it's not narrow. It's not only applicable to exploit development, but also it's fundamental information about the internals of how the computer works, how it processes, how the CPU is dealing with the data, and that is then applicable to a wide range of different areas that you can go into within your career.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you look at the corpus of PWK, what attacks are there? We have buffer overflows, we have web, there's privilege escalation, there's password attacks, there's Active Directory, a few others. But only exploit development really requires you to understand every little thing that's happening in order to make it work. And to Will's point, when you're studying just a vanilla buffer overflow, you can do it without really getting into the details. But as soon as you start moving to dealing with DEP or ASLR, these are Windows defenses, then you're going to get stuck. You're going to hit a wall. So by really digging down into the details and not thinking in terms of how do I exploit things, but rather how does the computer fundamentally work? That is what's going to equip you with the ability to think about exploiting harder, more hardened systems. And the reason for that is because as hackers in general, we always think like, oh, attack, 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 that's the cool stuff. But really what we are is investigators first. We want to understand the system as much as we can before we go and press that button to try to run the exploit.
Yeah, makes sense. Good question from chat here. We can step back a little bit. What are the ethical uses of exploit development? Are we just teaching people how to be criminals? And this is like the beginning, like this is some sort of pyramid scheme of us like getting a whole bunch of people out there, and then like we get a percentage of all the exploits and all the theft that they do. Is that what's going on here? Like what are we actually empowering people to do here?
I think we basically enable them to go and assess their either their own or someone else program or software for vulnerabilities, and in a legal way. So like certainly you can use it illegally, the knowledge as is, but like there is an industry for this, to actually hire people to take a piece of software and try to find vulnerabilities and exploit them. And basically, with having a bunch of people know how to do this stuff, we eventually there will be a lot of people finding vulnerabilities, and which will be hopefully fixed by the vendors, and eventually we move forward to a more secure world. I think that's the idea with this knowledge, to find the best stuff before attackers do. Yeah, basically.
Yeah, people are looking for these vulnerabilities anyways, right? So you want the good guys to find them, and not someone that actually is going to do some harm. Is that pretty much how you guys Will and Harb see it?
Yeah, that's also how I see it. I think, you know, there's the exploit in like the generic sense, but then there's a huge part of this learning path is also the like reverse engineering and the potential for bug discovery. And yeah, finding vulnerabilities will make the world hopefully a little bit safer in a digital sense.
Yeah.
By means of analogy, we have martial arts schools, we have boxing schools, we have wrestling schools. We teach people how to fight physically, and nobody really goes, "Is that bad? Like, are we creating a society of thugs?" No, like most people who go into these places are well-equipped members of society. They're fine. Sure, you'll get an occasional person who's going to go and join a gang, but they're going to do that anyway. And so because you have sort of the economics of gangs happening, you want people to be equipped to defend themselves. And you could take this a level higher to military training, really any kind of violence that exists. You want the good guys to be able to dish it out as well. Can you use it for bad? Yes. So when we teach, we try our best to be as mindful about what we're teaching. There's of course the Spider-Man reference about power and responsibility, and that applies. But at the end of the day, if we don't, and by we I don't mean OffSec, but if the industry decides, you know what, we can't teach this stuff, it's unethical. Okay, what's going to happen? You're just going to have bad actors who are going to learn it anyway, and then nobody will be equipped to deal with it. So there is a risk here, but it's important to understand that risk in context of the alternative.
So we're not out there Cobra Kai, do or die, sweep the leg, or anything like that as part of our training, right? Like this is legit professional items that help improve the security of the industry, improve the security of individual applications, et cetera, et cetera. That's what I'm hearing here.
At least that's what we like to say.
Another really good question from chat here. Does the learning curve push people away on these topics, that web or SE based attacks seem a lot easier and potentially more effective? Like what type of person? No, I guess two parts, really. Two things come to mind out of this. Number one, is this really more difficult than, say, learning web exploitation or similar? And what type of person is more likely to find this sort of attack venue interesting, as opposed to just doing web attacks and that sort of item? Why don't you rant on that one a little bit?
There's a lot going on in those series of questions. I would say to the first question from the chat, I think it can, but at the same time, that's what EXP-100 is meant to sort of solve as a problem in terms of being overwhelming, these modules being an obstacle. I think a lot of people who have or maybe are presently interested in exploit development, especially if they don't have a computer science or low-level programming background, can very quickly get overwhelmed. That was definitely my experience. You're learning, as we've said multiple times, many things simultaneously at a very high level, and that can be an obstacle for people. I think breaking down, and sorry, just to add to that, like from a learning perspective, being on the internet, finding hundreds, thousands of articles and walkthroughs, etc., presupposing all different types and levels of knowledge. That can be very difficult, and we have sort of a single and progressive path through all of those possibilities that hopefully will make it less of an obstacle.
Makes sense. Other thoughts?
I have a hot take.
All right, let's hear it.
Here's the take. I think that the only reason why anything in tech is considered hard is because people are impatient. And I think that this is something that plagues me as a learner. I think it plagues most people as learners. But what I as you'll see throughout this conversation, I love analogies. So here we go. Take music as an example. You're learning an instrument. No matter what the song is, it could be the hardest song in the world for that instrument, the hardest possible repertoire. But if you slow it down 100% or 200% or 1,000%, then it's just one note really, really slowly. And so if you're working through exploit development, yes, there's a lot of moving pieces and there's a lot of small things to understand. But if you go sufficiently slowly and you're okay being patient with it, it'll be fine. Every single step is really easy to get from one to the next. The problem is there's 1,000 of them and we want to get through it before we have to have lunch. If we take our time and really, 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 really take each piece of output as its own thing and look at it and examine it and be interested in it, then it's a piece of cake.
Piece of cake. So this is super easy. Yeah.
Easier said than done, for sure.
Yeah.
I think having that level of patience is super difficult, and so that's the hard part.
Yeah.
I think there is another aspect to it. When we deal with so with EXP, we typically deal with memory corruption, vulnerabilities or exploitation. Here, I think dealing with assembly or bytecode and hex and bits, that's much less natural than dealing with web-based code. And I think it makes it harder in a way, especially because of this. So when you do web stuff or web exploitation, you typically you only deal with high-level languages. JavaScript, PHP, Java, whatever. Even when you write your exploit, unless it's again a memory corruption exploit in a web service, but typically not. I think dealing with higher level languages is much easier than dealing with lower level stuff, and it requires more time, as Jeremy said.
Yeah. A personal opinion, having spent years as a pen tester, I can say the majority of the time I found myself using exploits that are, low hanging fruit. You go in there. Who wants to work harder than they need to, right? So you go into an environment, you find something. Okay, the easy way in, I'm taking it. If I can SE somebody in, they'll open the door. They'll send me their password. By God, I'm doing that. I'm not going to make myself, sweat unless I need to. However, there certainly has been assessments that I was on where things that I had learned about exploit development were 100% applicable and got me in. I like a quick example of this. This is not exploit development, but I took what I learned from exploit development, and I had a scenario where I was at a facility, and they gave me the exact same access that they give a new hire. No special items. I didn't have a special tool set, nothing like that. I just had a desktop access. Within that, they had a homegrown application that they used to track all of their inventory. Their business was storage that would go to your local location, and you could make use of the storage. And so they had to track the inventory, where it's at, how long it's there, the billing, all that sort of thing was in this custom app. Looking at it, it seemed weird, and also I didn't have a lot to work with, where I didn't have custom tools. They weren't a big organization, big infrastructure. And so what I did was I downloaded Ollie Debug, which you could run and run without having to go through an installer, right? I didn't have administrator rights, so I was able to still get access to this as a debugger, and load up their custom tool in there, set breakpoints in terms of every time that it was whatever the system call is for Windows for opening network connections, and then set that up in there and started looking through memory every time that it would open a network connection. And in that, I found embedded in the application the hard-coded password for the backend database. Turned out the way the application worked is they had one account for everything, but they had user permissions applied on the client side, not the server side, right? Very bad architecture for an application. But being able to get that password, I was then able to connect directly to the backend database as, I think it was like DBA or something like that. And then game over. I had direct access to everything. I could do whatever I wanted. And it was a core architectural issue with this homegrown application. 100% the type of material as what is covered in exploit development, and very applicable to those sorts of items. I think it's a really good, at least for me, it was a great example in terms of how this sort of knowledge and not being dependent upon tools and attacks that other people have made really empower you as an assessor to do something unique and really deliver value to an organization as part of the assessment. Because otherwise, if all you're doing is running tools that other people have written, you're very replaceable, aren't you? Like it doesn't matter who's being hired to come in there and press go on these buttons. You're very replaceable. You're no one person's not any better than the other person in terms of pressing the go button. And so that what you bring to the table as an assessor is that unique perspective and going above and beyond the tools. And what I love always about this line of topic that we're talking about is it's a beautiful way to get into that sort of items, that sort of personal empowerment. Anything to say about that, or am I just rambling?
No, I think you are right with this. So I think the skills you acquire for binary exploitation, it's typically goes hand in hand with reverse engineering binaries, and you can basically apply the knowledge. Even it doesn't matter if you came from maybe like a malware analysis background or exploit development background. The skill set of the two are very, very similar, so you can easily jump from one to the other. There are some key or unique items for both what you apply as another skill, but most of the stuff, again, dealing with assembly, debuggers, as you said, breakpoints, analyze how the program runs, what it does, etc. These are common stuff. So while you learn either of them, first it will empower you to do the other.
Csaba, I got a question for you. Say that somebody is really into this stuff. They're doing reverse engineering, they're doing exploit development, they like both. And at some point they have to decide, okay, am I going to go more into the exploit track or more into the malware track? And let's say that finances aren't an issue and it's just a matter of what do I want to do or what should I do? Is there a, like, do you find that the best malware analysts versus the best exploit developers think differently about problems? Is there something happening in their minds that is different one to the other, or would you say it's just personal preference at that point?
I would say just personal preference at that point. Cool. Yeah. I remember I don't remember who it was on Twitter, but there was a guy very good in reverse engineering, and he said that, and he always did like malware reverse engineering. And at one day he started to do exploit development, and he said, and he eventually wrote that he's eventually doing the same stuff, almost the same stuff, what he did for malware stuff for exploit development. So gotcha. I think it's at that point, it's just a personal preference, what you like more.
Awesome.
It's very interesting because other domains in security aren't quite like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're a great pen tester, it doesn't mean you're going to be a great threat hunter or a SOC analyst.
Going back to some of the discussion in chat, there was a question about age restrictions. Probably not going to dive too deep into that right now, but I will say that there are specific laws that have to do with data of minors, and that very much leads our age restrictions that are inherent within our training structures. We need to comply by certain laws, and those laws define, you know, what information we can hold about who, when you consider the fact that, like, as a training company, we need to know what material we've gone through, validate identity for certifications and items like that. That's more than just doing roadblocks. So you know, certainly something that if you have specific questions about that, I would say contact orders, and they can break it down for you. I also see some discussion. I'm going to reword this a little bit about how this material might tie into the OSCP exam and training. Like, how is this a good preparatory material if somebody has the goal of OSCP? Should they start here before they start going into Pen 200? What should their flow be like there?
I would say that the best starting point for Pen 200 is Pen 100. You're not going to go through the exploit development stuff, so you're not going to go through low-level debugging or immunity or assembly, but PWK does teach that. This, I would say, is much more useful for somebody who wants to go beyond the PWK material. The PWK material is really a tiny little slice of it, and in fact, the first module of EXP-100 is the buffer overflow module from PWK. The only difference is the use of WinDBG, which is a much more intense debugger than immunity. So PWK itself might prepare you for EXP-301 too, but EXP-100 gives you more specific training, I would say.
A interesting question here. Timely. A lot of people are asking about AI anymore, and I know this is one of Jeremy's favorite topics. What's everyone's take on ChatGPT and the potential for worse gaps in the industry between actually understanding and comprehending the work that you're doing? Like, do we think that AI is going to hurt or increase that issue? I mean, we all know that we've all encountered people where they're you know, in the industry, but what they do is they press go in a vulnerability scanner, they press go in an automated exploitation tool, and then they package up the result and put it in a report, and they don't really understand what happened in order to get those results. Do we think that AI and what we're seeing on some of these popular apps lately is going to contribute to that?
I mean, that's 100% what I do. I don't know what's going on at all.
I don't have anything super advanced to say about AI. The only thing I would say is that, like most things and like most technology, it can be used in many different ways, and it really depends on how you use it. I think if you rely on it as a substitute for knowledge, then there can be some negative effects. If you use it in as an aid, then it can, I think, augment your.
Makes sense. Getting back more specifically to EXP-100, what if you're a new student starting to go through this material, what can they expect? What will that feel like to them? For instance,
Okay,
like they got the LMS, you know, are there going to be videos? Is there challenge questions? Is that, you know, how, what can they expect to see? What's that going to be like?
So the nice thing about almost all the 100 level material is that they start from the same place.
Yeah.
We believe that fundamentally there are 3 skills or areas of knowledge that people need to know, no matter what they're doing in security. You need to know Linux and sometimes Windows, meaning system administration. You need to know networking, and you need to know some scripting. And so all of our 100 level material has something to do with those 3 things, starting with Linux, then Windows, then networking, then scripting. And EXP-100 actually starts there. And then it dives into assembly, working with the debugger, disassembly, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of what students can actually expect, it's text and exercises. One of the main differences between 100 and 200 level material is that the amount of text between exercises is much shorter in the 100 level, right? So you read a bit of text, you do an exercise, you read a bit of text, do an exercise. And the idea there is to get the student as actively engaged with learning as fast as possible, because they don't yet have the background to just absorb a whole chapter of writing before doing the work.
So you're not going to be spending hours on theory before you can do something hands-on. It's a lot more directly engaging there. Yeah. With
perhaps the exception of learning the debugger at once. That's a really cool module that Will wrote. That is very, I wouldn't say it's theoretical, but it's very practical. It's very like, okay, here's what this hotkey does. Here's what this button does. Will, you want to talk more about that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think it's an interesting module because it's simultaneously an introduction to a tool and to the sort of like broader theme of debugging. So we're kind of trying to tackle those 2 things at once. What I really like about those 2 modules is they give you a really, I think, well-rounded idea of what is possible with WinDebug. So we first go through, you know, why you might want to be doing debugging in the first place to sort of ground that usage. But then we give a bunch of examples around reading and modifying registers and memory, etc., and kind of go through all of the different variations for those commands and why you might want to use one over another. And then get into, you know, not just the obvious things about like setting breakpoints, but like a little bit more detailed on the difference between software and hardware breakpoints, when you might want to use one over the other, and then more advanced usages like breakpoint-based actions, conditional breakpoints, and a little bit to the scripting as well.
Awesome. So in terms of additional material that's coming, like anything new that's currently in development you want to tease out at all?
On the topic of Debug,
Yeah.
like I said, that topic sort of ends with a short module on scripting, but we have a new module on scripting, or really Debug automation with Python, and this module PyKD, which is pretty powerful and also used by some other tools on the back end. Pretty excited about that.
Anything else we wanna bring up on future items?
I think later on we'll have an introduction to Ghidra, which I can't pronounce ever, no matter how many times Siki repeats it.
Is it Ghidra?
Ghidra.
I don't know. I'm not sure I'm right on that.
G-Hydra, I don't know. But that is another disassembler.
Yeah, there's also an introduction to the Win32 API programming in C that will be
Yes.
a little bit farther down the line.
Nice. Yeah, I remember that experience that students would have when they first opened up a debugger for the first time, and they're like, what the hell is this? You know, that is just extremely overwhelming, extremely yeah, just having that comfort in terms of taking those first few steps on it is just difficult. And so having some introductory material for that, as you described, is certainly going to be beneficial for a lot of people. Let's look at chat here. Anything else going on? Speaking of the previous question about ethics, does OffSec implement any controls to help ensure training isn't being given to people? Yeah. We certainly have standard controls in terms of prohibited people and that sort of items. So those items are always in place. When my learn one sub expires, do I lose access? Yeah. When you if you have a subscription, then yes, you don't have access to the material when the subscription is not active. It looks like you addressed the question about Pen 300 already, Harb. Anything you wanna say on voice with that one?
Yeah, Pen 300 is more of a sequel to Pen 200. It really dives into, okay, in Pen 200, you learned how to attack things. In Pen 300, you learn how to attack things when there's software trying to stop you. So there is some debugging through dealing with antivirus. How do you upload a binary to a target system that has advanced AV, and you want to get around that? So we do some debugging to manipulate the binary so that you can get around its signatures. But aside from that, there's not so much there. There's a lot more. Well, I mean, EXP-301 is all about debugging and writing exploits, and then EXP-312 has a bunch as well. Maybe Csaba, you can say a bit more about how it relates.
Yeah, I think in EXP-312, so we don't do memory corruption as is, but it's more focused on logic exploitation. But we do shellcoding because we do require shellcodes in some of the exploits, and we do a whole lot of reverse engineering in EXP-312. So knowing how to use, again, debuggers, assembly, all this stuff, it will be very useful when it comes to reverse engineering, like analyzing software, understand how it works, etc., and shellcoding. So
shellcoding, you're doing something pretty cool about shellcoding, I understand.
Yes, so there has been a lot of demand, or many people ask if we deal with Apple Silicon in our EXP-312, and we know that Apple is moving away from Intel, so we eventually started to work on. So we had a shellcoding module for Intel, and now we will have one for Apple Silicon. So that's what we are doing And
That's awesome.
And I think we also discussed, so since it's ARM, and ARM is usually, again, so writing a shellcode on Mac OS is 95% the same as writing a shellcode on any other NIX-based system, because Mac OS is also a NIX-based system with some differences. But we also discussed making an ARM shellcoding for other NIX-based system. So to change the macOS specific items and see how it's done in other places. Again, it will be very, very similar, but still there are some small differences.
Jim, you're muted right now.
There we go. This is better. Yes, definitely something to look forward to. So we got under 10 minutes remaining. Want to call out a couple things. As soon as this session is over, we will be joining on the OffSec Discord server and doing our weekly office hour that happens every week at 1 o'clock Eastern. So feel free to join us there. If you're not on the Discord server, I put a link into chat on how to join. The other thing we want to call out is, for those of us that are aware, there is a standard an offering that we have called OffSec Academy. We're starting to offer OffSec Academy for SOC 200 here, starting on Wednesday, February 22nd. So we're getting pretty close to that. So if you are a SOC 200 student, this is something that you can access, and it doesn't cost you anymore, right? You can just access the items. I put a link in chat in terms of breakdown about what time is it, how often, how to access it, et cetera, et cetera. So definitely check that out if you are a SOC 200 student. We'll see what else the Academy team brings to us next on these items. So definitely check out those links. I hope that everybody joins us in the office hour, coming up here in about what is it, about 7 minutes. As we wrap up, anything that we didn't talk about on EXP-100 that we should have, any last minute items that you all want to bring up?
Yeah, just no, go ahead, Will.
I was just going to say, not specifically on EXP-100, but there are some upcoming changes at the 200 and 300 level that we could probably mention. Specifically, like Jeremy said, EXP-301 has some more easier modules, specifically the vanilla buffer overflow SEH modules that will be getting moved down to the 200 level and reworked, and will be replaced at the 300 level by some more advanced material in the future.
Awesome. Anything else that we should be touching on?
Just a huge shout out to you both, Will and Csaba. We talked about how this stuff is hard to learn because there's so much to do and so much to absorb, but that makes it equally hard to teach because there's so much to express. And both of you do a really, truly wonderful job of guiding the student through the technology, making sure they understand the context. So really congratulations and well done.
Yeah, you have to understand something pretty damn deep in order to make it simple. And that is always a great sign in terms of how well somebody really understands material. Is if they don't get it, it comes out very complex. so yeah, I second that, definitely. Good, awesome work on that.
No crash. It's good to hear that EXP-100 is a good supplement for you, even in EXP-301. That's great.
Yeah. All right. Well, unless there's anything else, we might as well wrap up and start heading over to the next item. Unless there's any other items you want to say, you want to give a shout out to anybody, say hi to your mom, whatever the case may be. Permission to be beamed up. Yes, I will take care of that for you. No worries at all. All right, guys. All right, chat saying hi to their mom. So that's always good. That's awesome. Thank you, all three of you, for coming and talking about this. We really always appreciate this sort of time and giving students access to the developers directly. You know, that's not something that is always easy to get scheduled out, and it certainly helps people understand what we're doing and what we're accomplishing and that sort of item. So thank you so much. Again, thank you to chat for showing up and being so engaged, asking good questions. Definitely appreciate that. Again, follow us over to Discord and we'll continue the conversation there, as well as anything else. So right here we're mainly talking about EXP-100, but there you can ask about anything. And if we don't have anything to talk about, we'll talk about like whatever has happened in our favorite show in the last week. So there's always something to kick around there. So thank you so much, everybody. We will catch you next time.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
You got to do
Bye.
the adios.